Hello BookTube, it's Late Cooper here, and I'm doing a super late Friday read / July reading wrap up part 2. There's probably a light whine noise in the background. It's the fan. Please just ignore it because, to be honest, it's too effing hot to turn it off. It just is. It's muggy and it's hot. And I'm even filming this at night and it's still muggy and hot. I did my makeup, put my glasses on for about 2 minutes, took them off. And they had completely lifted up parts of my makeup because it's so effing hot. And I mean, I'm one of those people, like, you know, I recognize I have huge pores and I get oily, so I powder. I set that shit. And it still didn't withstand glasses. So I'm wearing contacts, which I'm also not super thrilled about. So if I look sort of like I'm high with super red eyes, I apologize. It's the contacts. I'm going to do my part 2 wrap up first, and then I'll talk about what I'm reading. This is a little bit early to be doing the second half of my wrap up. You know, we've got like 3 days left in July. I might finish the book I'm reading, but I might not. So I'm just going to do it now. I finally finished about a week ago In the Night Garden by Catherine Valente. This was my like big book that I was reading this month in very small increments. Freaking loved it. It was really nice to read this after having kind of a couple of letdown books. I really love it. I've talked about it in 3 or 4 different videos. It's basically a bunch of interconnected fairy tale-esque stories that are very much influenced by non-Western folklore. I give this book 4.5 stars. The next thing I finished reading was Tomorrow's Kin by Nancy Kress. I have a full video of it. It's a new release science fiction, first contact, aliens arrive on Earth, and a geneticist is invited to their ship for science reasons. And like I said, I got a full review on it. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. It wasn't great. I have a lot of thoughts in my review / discussion video, so yeah. Next thing I read was The Worst Werewolf by Jacqueline Roback. And if I'm saying your name wrong, Jackie, I apologize. This book is published by Night Star Press. I will leave a link to the publisher's page down below if you're interested in checking it out. I thought it was going to be an MM romance when I picked it up, but I think it's more of like paranormal novel with a slight MM element to it. Don't go into it thinking you're going to get like a traditional romance novel, because it's not. So it is about a world where there are werewolves. There are 2 werewolf packs, like 2 main werewolf packs, and they're kind of more like vampires than werewolves because they actually were created / became an offshoot of vampires to combat vampires because vampires were raging across the world, like basically wiping humanity out. And the story opens with kind of this second-class citizen werewolf named Garvey, who is playing a lot of different sides in this like political struggle, and he seduces and captures Human, who is supposed to become like the blood servant of a werewolf in this one pact, but the other werewolves in his pack want to discredit him and kill him because they don't like him, and they have contracted Garvey to kind of fuck up this whole blood servant thing. And the story just kind of spirals out from there. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of humans being captured and turned into werewolf slaves. If I have at any point said vampire instead of werewolf in this description, I apologize. The book is pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. It definitely ended on a cliffhanger, just so you're warned. And it is a little bit tricky to get into. The writing style is very unique. It was a little bit difficult to follow at first. Like, I definitely had to read a couple of chapters before I kind of got the rhythm of the writing. But it was pretty entertaining. All of the characters were really unique and distinctive. I really liked Garvey as a character. My biggest criticism is that there really wasn't a whole lot of setting. It felt unmoored. Like, I couldn't really picture where it was taking place or any of the settings. Because at one point, it seemed that we were in rural eastern Washington. Like, there's a reference to it. But then there's a reference to them being in Cape Cod. And they're just driving around in a van. So, or like in cars. So, I don't know. And then I honestly, legitimately have no idea where the main werewolf compound is located. And that kind of bugged me. Like, I didn't really realize how much I really want to know the setting. Not necessarily that you have to spend a whole lot of time describing it to me, but just telling me like what city it takes place in really helps ground the story for me. So yeah, if you're looking for it's very violent and it's not super nice. A lot of the characters are not nice people, and it definitely has a good amount of gore. But if you like kind of rough, gory, violent, hot vampires, werewolves, then you can check it out. The next thing I finished was PhoneGap by Laura Ruby. Yeah, Laura Ruby. This is a YA book. I gave this book a 4-star. It was so close to being a 5-star, but the ending did not entirely come together and parts of it felt rushed. Otherwise, it would have been a 5-star read. This book is about a small town called PhoneGap. There are 2 brothers. One of them, he's entering his senior year in high school. Their father is dead, and they've been abandoned by their mother several years ago. She remarried and moved across the country and left them. The oldest brother is like in his mid-20s. Okay. So he decided to stay and take care of his younger brother. So prior to the beginning of the book, a girl had shown up at their house, beaten up, and wouldn't tell them who she was or how she got there, but they gave her their spare apartment connected to their house, and became really close friends with her, and everyone loved her in the town, and the older brother was going to propose to her, and then she disappeared, and the younger brother saw it happen, and he tried to get the police to find the kidnapper, but he could never really give them a satisfactory description of the kidnapper, and so everyone thinks he's kind of lying, and that she ran off and abandoned them like their mother, and that it's like the younger brother's fault because he's really weird. So this book is dealing with kind of the aftermath of that and how it has affected the 2 brothers' relationships and how it affects the younger brother who, you know, he knows what he saw, and now he knows that everyone doesn't believe him, and it's very frustrating, and he's always been kind of this weird outsider in the town, and he likes this girl who is the local beekeeper's daughter, who everyone kind of describes as having a hot bod and a hideous horse face kind of thing. But he has always really liked her, and it's summer, and they eventually start a relationship while life continues on. So it's very much a story about relationships and family. It's like really heavily focused on relationships and family. So the plot is kind of quiet, but I freaking love the characters. I loved all of the characters. I love the dynamics. I love the stuff that Laura Ruby explores in this with, I don't know if you could call it, I think you could call it a disability. There's some neuroatypical representation in here. I think that's what you would call it. If anyone's read this and wants to correct me on those specific terms or how you'd classify the issue with the younger brother, feel free to do that, because it's not my wheelhouse. But I loved the representation. I love the exploration of what's going on with him, and I thought it was done really well. There are repeating themes of female fear and concern over bodily autonomy, and that kind of nagging, persistent fear of being raped by people that, you know, happens when you're a young 20-something woman surrounded by men who don't take no for an answer, or get mad at you, or get violent with you when you say no. So that's another recurring theme, because we do have the perspective of the girl, Rosa, who disappeared. I went into this book expecting it to be a lot more like Welcome to Night Vale and how weird the town was. The town was a lot less weird than I thought it was going to be, but then it kind of at the very last minute turned out to be more weird than it had seemed. And that felt a little rushed. I felt like there probably could have been more foreshadowing laid down for the ending and how the ending worked out. My biggest issue, though, is the villain. The villain's extremely inconsistent. He's described in multiple different ways that are kind of contradictory. I don't think you can attribute it to what's going on with the younger son, because the way he describes other people is really consistent. Like when he describes them, like the way they move or the way they walk, that's really consistent. But when he thinks of the villain, that is inconsistent and changes. And I don't know if that's intentional. It felt actually sloppy. It felt like we kind of course corrected in the last 25% of the book to sort of fit the ending the way she wanted to do the ending. And it felt a little clunky. And I have a feeling maybe that's why people aren't super loving it. There's also kind of the climactic thing at the end. I wish we'd had from the younger son's perspective, or that it had just taken him a little bit more effort to do a couple of really key things in the end. So the ending didn't quite work for me. It didn't quite come together. The rest of it is just so good. So I would still highly suggest you check it out. Like, if you like contemporary with a little bit of magical realism or fabulous elements, I would still check it out. And then the last thing I finished was Coffee Boy by Austin Enchant, which is, I don't know, like, probably a lot of people would call this a short story. I call it a novella. It's 61 pages, and I consider anything over 50 pages to be a novella. 50 to 100 pages, it's a novella. So that's what I'm counting it as. And this is also put out by Ninth Star Press again. I'll leave a link to the publisher's website if you're interested in checking it out. Austin Enchant is a trans man, and he writes about trans characters. So the protagonist of Coffee Boy is a young trans man who's recently graduated college, like undergrad, and one of his professors, who is kind of one of those overly enthusiastic, bad, straight ally characters, or types of people, who just thinks, a trans person who gets out of bed in the morning is just so brave, that kind of rhetoric, right? Has given him an internship, has given Kieran, that's the protagonist, an internship on a very small office in a political campaign for like a local senator election. And it's just kind of a little contemporary story about Kieran dealing with work environments as a trans person, and different work environments, because there's definitely this contrast between, he's got like a job basically working at McDonald's that pays money, but that is terrible, and he's constantly being misgendered and no one gives a fuck, right? And then he's got this non-paying internship with the political campaign where his two supervisors are trying to be really helpful in gendering him correctly. You've got the professor who means well, but is just kind of a terrible ally. And then you've got another supervisor who's a bisexual man who is just like really firm and earnest, and is like really jumps on people in the office when they misgender him, which creates its own kind of tension. So you've got these things, and the character trying to figure out like how to navigate in a professional setting without being just overwhelmed by the daily grind of being constantly misgendered and having people think and judge him for being trans and stuff like that. So I gave this book 4 stars, or I gave this novella 4 stars. I thought it was really good. I quite enjoyed the characters. I love the end. Like, Austin Enchant writes such amazing relationship stuff and like romance stuff, and it's just like, oh, I love it. It's so good. Not everything about this book was like totally up my alley, and I'm not really a big contemporary fan, but despite that, I really loved the relationship. Won't lie, the bisexual supervisor named Seth, totally 100% envisioned him as Arthur from Inception. But yeah, I thought it was great. And so if you're looking for a short little own voices trans narrative, I would highly suggest reading it. It's everything I've read for the month. Not great. I think I read like 8 things, total of, 2,400 pages. It's not my lowest month page-wise. It's also not my best, but I also had a couple of really high months in a row, so we were bound to have this has been kind of a slump, to be honest. I think my average rating, if you averaged all the ratings I gave this month, it's barely above a 3-star, just because I had a couple of reads I didn't click with. It's gonna happen. So this weekend I will be reading The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This finally came in at the library. I think I put this on hold back in like March. It took forever for me to get this book, and I might finish it before the end of the month. That's 3 days away, and I don't see myself really pushing really hard to finish this super fast, so I probably won't. I'll just be reading it through until the beginning of next month. Anyways, this is a retelling of the Vasilisa folk tale, I believe, and possibly some elements of, I want to say, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, but I could be totally off on that. But I kind of thought that was my impression of it because it has bear in the title, so we're gonna have like a folklore character with like bear symbology, so that's why it kind of made me think of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. I really hope I'm getting those cardinal directions correctly on the title. Irregardless, I'm about 40 pages into it right now. It's not entirely what I was expecting. It's definitely rooted in a historical time period. It's during the reign of Ivan II, Prince of Moscow, Prince of the Muscovites. So 14th century, like 1330, 1340-ish, I think, in Russia. And Vasya, the Vasilisa character, is still a very young child at this point. We do know that her grandmother had some sort of like magic thing about her, and that her mother was convinced that she would inherit it too. So right now her father is off to Moscow to marry a new wife to look after his youngest child. So I assume he's going to marry kind of like an evil stepmother character. And that's where we're headed. But we shall see. It's actually, I thought this book was much longer than it is. It's like 320 pages in this hardcover edition, which, can we just take a moment to talk about how ugly the American edition of this cover is? I will insert a picture of the UK cover, which is gorgeous, and one of the reasons I honestly wanted to pick this up, it was kind of like, not a cover buy, but what it was cover read. But this cover is so ugly in comparison. Let me know what you think down below. But yeah, it's really short. It's Catherine Arden's debut novel. So far it's good. I'm not super gripped, just because I feel like we're doing a lot of setting up for the rest of the book, and we've had a lot of other POVs besides the protagonist so far. She's had probably the least amount of screen time, so we shall see. I'll be reading this over the weekend, and I will tell you my thoughts in my next wrap up, I guess. This video was probably a little bit rambling because I am tired. I am so tired and just like frazzled right now. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these things, or if you're thinking about picking them up. And I think I'm gonna go film my Tome Topple TBR. A little early to do that, but gotta get stuff done, you know? Let me know how you're surviving summer, or if you're doing anything fun, or you're reading anything really interesting this weekend. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.